Today we're going to be tying my baitfish ball set of flies. There's 4 different variations of roughly the same fly. There's a balanced baitfish, a weighted baitfish, an unweighted baitfish, and a booby baitfish, and we'll go over how to tie all 4. I'll also go over a few leader formulas and still water fly line setups that I like to use when fishing a team of these flies. When I was coming up with this set of baitfish flies, I was having trouble targeting trout that were either chasing baitfish subsurface or pushing them up to the surface. You know, large streamers weren't working, and when I was throwing individual baitfish patterns, it just didn't seem to be keying in on it. And, you know, my catch rates weren't really where I wanted them to be. So I kind of took some inspiration from an Alabama rig in bass fishing, which is a set of lures meant to mimic a bait ball. And I tried to take that concept and think of a way I could put it into a fly fishing setup. And this set of flies is what I came up with. It's kind of a modular system, so you can change them out depending on your depth, what type of fly line you have, and just how you want the flies to look underwater. Laid out here is all the materials you're going to need to tie each variation. I also wanted to take a quick moment to talk about these dripstone tungsten beads. As you all know, tungsten beads are absurdly expensive for what they are, and quality can vary wildly depending on which company you're buying your beads from. So my buddy and fellow YouTuber, Eric Leslie, he's got an online shop, dripstone.co, and he set out to find super high quality tungsten beads and sell them at a reasonable price. And he found some of the best beads on the market. He offers slotted tungsten beads, countersunk tungsten beads, and inverting tungsten beads. I encourage you to check him out and try these beads for yourself. Once you tie on them, you're not going to be tying on anything else. They're that good. You can use code TroutFlies to get 10% off your order. I encourage you to check them out. In the vise, I've got a size 6 Gamakatsu B10S stinger hook. It's been debarbed. On the hook, I've got a 3.3mm black nickel countersunk tungsten bead. This is one from Driftstone. I'm tying in my materials with 6/0 white Semperfli classic wax thread. I'm just securing the bead using figurating wraps about a bead length behind the eye. This is kind of baby fat minnow style. I'm taking my thread back to the bend of the hook, and I'm going to be tying in a natural colored Squirrel Zonker. I'm measuring a length of about 1.5 times the length of the hook for the tail. Splitting the fibers using a little bit of moisture to keep the fibers apart so the tie-in point is clean. And I'm going to take 5 or 6 secure wraps to tie in my materials at the tie-in point. You really want to crank down here so the hide won't move on you or twist on you around the hook. I'm trying to make sure it's staying perfectly in line at the top of the hook so it'll swim right. For the belly of the baitfish, we're going to be creating a short dubbing brush using a combination of 3 materials. The first one I'm laying out here and kind of spreading out in about a 2.5 inch long section is SLF Prism and Ice Pearl. It needs to be pretty sparse, you don't need a ton of dubbing, just spread it out evenly. I'm also going to be adding some fibers of Nature's Spirit Fish Hunter Marabou. This is fluorescent silver dun colored. And the final material is going to be some Opal Mirage Polarflash, and I'm just taking a few appropriately length fibers and spreading them evenly along the brush. I'm going to be using this Loon tweezer to pick up the group of materials and put them in a split thread dubbing loop and twisting it up. Using a bodkin to flatten the thread and then split it. putting your fingers inside the loop to hold it open, and then taking your group of materials inside the Loon tweezers and setting them in. And then we're gonna twist it all back up, cord back up our thread. You're gonna want to keep a decent bit of thread tension while you're starting your spin, or else your materials will fly out of the loop. And you'll have to do this step over again, so kind of pull down slightly on your thread as you're starting your initial twist, and once it gets to about this state, you can just go quick until the materials seem secure and like they're not going to slide out if you put a little bit of pulling tension on them. You don't want to go too far, or else your thread will get pretty fragile, so there's kind of a sweet spot in how much you twist this up. But here I'm just going to make touching wraps with our dubbing loop brush going forward, and preening the materials back as I go, just to keep them out of the way. It'll keep the body a little more uniform and make the next steps a little bit easier. So we're going to go up to the end of the bead, fluff everything up, and then we're going to split along the top so we have a little bit of a flat top area to fold the Squirrel Zonker back over top. I've kind of got it evenly distributed in what would, I guess, be like a semicircle shape, and then I'm gonna pull the Squirrel Zonker over and secure it as best I can right behind the eye of the hook, trying not to capture fibers in a way that will make this tie-in point messy. You're going to want to keep this as clean as possible. So we've got it secure, and we're going to take our sharp Renomed scissors and make as clean of a cut as we can. Just take a few wraps to clean up the whole tie-in point up to the bead. We're going to need this area to attach some eyes in a little bit. But as you can see, there are a lot of fuzzy fibers there, so I'm going to take some wraps and try and clamp or hide as much of those fibers as I can. Now you can see the dubbing brush kind of sits nicely next to the squirrel, but it is pretty unruly and we want it to look clean and tapered like a baitfish, so I'm going to go in with some scissors and just kind of shape it to how I want. You could leave this as it is and it'll be pretty bulky and messy and move a lot of water, but I like to kind of get that nice baitfish profile on my flies, so I'm going to flatten the sides out a little bit and add a little bit of a taper to the body, and just take a minute or two to clean all that up here. I like this set of materials for movement purposes. With the Marabou in it, it kind of compresses when you move it, and it'll kind of puff back out when it comes to a stop. And that stop-start is a very important part of how this rig fishes. So the Marabou in this dubbing loop, while it's kind of a pain to work with, really adds the type of movement I'm looking for. To finish the underside of this head, I'm using a little bit of Bruiser Blend Jr. This is unicorn mane colored. We're gonna tie in the back portion up to the bead and then move our thread forward and tie in up to the hook eye. We're gonna spread it out until it's evenly along 180 degrees. You can kind of see what I'm going for there. And we're gonna gather all of it with our fingers and pull it straight back and take our thread and tie back over to keep this head clean. You can kind of finagle it a little bit to get it to lay how you want, and then brush it back to create our nice base of the head body area with the Bruiser blend. You flip it over and you see it's got a nice baitfish shape. The tail will swim great and the body will do that undulating movement you want from a stop and starting baitfish. It really does look great in the water and swims great. Now we're going to whip finish once our thread head is as clean as possible. I'm using a lighter to kind of singe any unruly fibers because we're going to be adding some eyes and some UV resin, and the small fibers will mess with putting the eyes on cleanly and applying the UV resin. So we're using some 3mm holographic eyes here. And just kind of pinching them onto each side so they're in the middle. Kind of jostling them into place. Practice really helps with getting these right consistently. You're going to lose a few eyes if you're just starting out trying to do this, but you kind of get your own system down for getting these onto the thread. I'm using my crusty fingers here to try and get them into place, and I've got them to where I like them so they're even on each side and look pretty uniform. I'm going to take some UV clear from Loon. This is their thick. I'm going to put a drop right in between those eyes to start building up a little bit of a solid UV resin head. This will keep the eyes in place and add some durability through the head. Just curing it up, making sure we get all of it torched. Then we're going to repeat the process underneath. You can see there's this nice little channel on the top and bottom where the UV resin can just kind of sit in there and fill gaps and make a nice little round uniform head. We're going to torch that up. At this point, the eyes are pretty secure, but since the UV resin is kind of holding it in place on top and bottom, but we don't have anything on the sides, we're just going to finish this off with some Solarez bone dry. It's a very thin UV resin that takes some of the tackiness that the Loon UV resin has and gets rid of it and creates a nice clear translucent UV resin head. It's a good trick to get some of your tackier UV resins to finish clear, is to put a little bit of this bone dry over your previous layer resin and see it looks clear and will be nice and reflective and shiny and all that. We're just going to torch it up. Make sure everything's baked, and really that's your baitfish. This is the weighted version. So the process for the 3 remaining versions are pretty similar in how we build the tail and body. There's just a little bit difference around the head, so we're going to quickly go through those patterns, and I'll slow down the tying when we get to a little different set of tying procedures, but let's get to the other versions. So for the unweighted baitfish, it's pretty much the same as a weighted baitfish, just without a bead, so same exact procedure. Next up is a booby baitfish. I've got a 1/4 inch white foam cylinder, and I'm taking about a 1/2 inch section, taking the hard edge off and rounding them off with my sharp scissors. And I'm going to do that on each side. The cylinder can be as long or as short as you want. It'll affect how fast it rises in the water column, so having a couple of different sizes would be a good idea. To get the eyes onto the hook, I'm taking some wraps of thread down the middle of the cylinder and then cranking down so they'll stay in place on the thread. Then we can just wrap the thread up to the eye of the hook and secure them to the top. I'm just going to take some figure-8ing wraps to get them securely in place, and then add a little bit of head cement onto the thread wraps to keep the eyes where I want them, and then the rest of the fly is the same procedure as the previous two. For the balanced version, I've got a Fulling Mill 5130 jig hook. This is a size 10. And I've got a 4mm Inverting Silver Tungsten Bead. This is to balance a fly out half-wit style. And other than that, we use our holographic eyes and use the same procedure as before. Now that we've tied all 4 variations of the baitfish, I want to go over a few leader setups, some stillwater line setups, and a few basic strategies I use when fishing this set of flies. Like I said, between these 4 different variations, it can be pretty modular, so you can set them up for different sink rates or how you want the leader to be vertically or horizontally in the water. This first setup is for a sinking version using the balanced baitfish ball. You can see my leader setup here. The balanced baitfish goes on the point, followed by the weighted baitfish and unweighted baitfish attached using triple surgeon's knots on tags. Typically you want to space your flies on stillwater leaders about 4 to 5 feet apart, but since this is supposed to be a baitfish ball where the individual flies you want to look like a school of baitfish, I go with shorter tippet sections in between the flies, typically 2.5 to 3 feet. So for this one you can get deep by fishing on an intermediate or seamless density line. You can get as deep as you want as long as you're willing to let it count down. Or you can fish it on a floating or midge-tip line to hit those mid to upper sections of the water column. You can use any type of retrieve, just standard stripping, retrieves, slow, fast, erratic. You can use a hand twist retrieve if you want it just to look like a swimming ball of bait. Or you can use like a roly-poly to really rip it. Next up is an indicator setup with a floating line. Just stick a strike indicator on there and do whatever still water indicator leader setup you want. Again, here's what I like to do with my indicator setup. And again, it's a balanced, weighted, unweighted baitfish setup. You can do 2 unweighteds with the balanced, but I'd have the balanced one on the point for an indicator setup. Just throw it out, wait for the indicator to go under. Pretty good way to get baitfish eating trout when they're not willing to chase and want something static. And lastly, we have our 2 Booby baitfish ball setups. One is kind of a washing line using a floating line or a midge tip, with the Booby baitfish on point and a weighted baitfish on top and unweighted or weighted in the middle. This will make sure it acts kind of like a washing line does and has the Booby on the point up in the water column with the other 2 flies kind of dipping below some weight. We also have a parabolic line setup, which is specifically the setup I had in mind when developing the Booby baitfish ball trio. This uses a parabolic or sweep line. I use a Rio slow sweep. The idea behind this is to get the flies to rise vertically on the paws as opposed to rising on the strip. It kind of acts almost like a suspending jerkbait, if you know how that works. You can move this as fast or slow as you want. It's good for probing different water depths because you can count it down to whatever depth you want, and then once you start getting it moving, it'll kind of stay in that specific depth range. It might get a little deeper on you as you go through your cast, but you can cover a wide range of water depths with this. It's great for prospecting and figuring out where the trout want to eat. Again, you have a weighted, unweighted, and Booby baitfish. You can use any standard still water retrieve, again, like a stripping, hand twist, or roly-poly. Anyways, like I said, it's pretty modular, so you can switch out each version however you want to create your own way of fishing these. I'd tie all 4 up, just have them all so you can kind of figure out a rig as you go. Anyways, here's a few clips of each different style of rig being fished on our local waters. Again, if you're not a fly tyer or don't want to tie these up yourself, they're available in my shop. There we go. Oh, I dropped the rod. That could have been a disaster. Doesn't feel that big. On the Booby. Okay, let's go from there. in the net. Yeah, I'll fish this cast and then let you go through.
Yeah, I'll go hug that ice right there.
All right. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, nice. They just suck it in, don't they?
Yeah.
Are you floating or sinking?
I've got a hover,
Do you?
but I've got some 4mm beads on, so. But took the top one, so. Yep.
I'll kick by you while you're busy with that.
Yep. Yes! Oh, we actually hooked a fish. Okay. Oh no, line's caught up. Okay. Oh, he's pissed. We need to get our line clear here. Let's get him on the reel. Oh, figured something out, I think. He's pissed. What's he on? Balanced baitfish? Yep. Okay. We just need it dead drifted, I guess. Ooh. They're fighting hard. It's a nice bow. It's a really nice bow. Come on. Get up. Oh, I've got too much line out. Yes, dude, we're not skunked. Let's go. Dude, that is a big bow. Wow.